that we're actually live everywhere. All right. Let's rock and roll. Here we go. Hey, Grace. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Okay. Welcome back to another Wine Wednesday. As usual, you've got to give us a second to make sure that we're actually streaming everywhere that we're supposed to be streaming, because you guys know the struggle's real. The struggle has been real for weeks as we've been doing this. So let me make sure. What are you drinking, Grace?
I am drinking a Nebbiolo Pinot Noir blend.
I'm sorry. That you're going to have to explain that.
Well, I get given free creative control. They're my two favorite varieties. And I was kind of blending something and I thought, I think these two will kind of work well together. And they did. So I
And they
blended
actually
them.
are really good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually really good. Super juicy, really fresh. It's good.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
It's something
Yeah.
I've never heard of. I've never heard anyone tell me that they were drinking a Nebbiolo Pinot blend before. I don't know if it exists anywhere else. Do you know if there are others?
I actually don't know, and it's not something that I really looked into, but yeah, I suppose, I've been working at a vineyard where we have 22 different varieties planted, like beautiful, and I get free creative control as the winemaker, and because it's a really new region in terms of the Australian landscape, I can just do whatever I want. So I do whatever I want.
Hell yeah. I
Yeah.
would.
Yeah.
That's cool. But so, okay, hold on. Let's do a real introduction, because we are live on X, which is, this is like, Maureen nailed it. Shout out to Maureen. You're the best. Thanks for figuring out our live stream issues. And Grace, this is a really smooth start for us. So we're like 4 minutes in. We've already introduced what you're drinking, and we're actually live. So we don't have to do it 3 times. God, this is a good Wednesday, girl.
This is a very good Wednesday.
Okay, so let me back up and introduce you guys. This is Grace Douglas. Some of you may recognize her. This isn't the first time that we've had Grace on one of our lives. So thank you so much again for coming back. Grace, I don't want to I don't want to always connect you to your dad because you are your own person, but Grace happens to be the daughter of Peter Douglas. And I always say Peter's like, I always use the word legendary, and he's always like, don't say that, stop. He's so humble. But Peter Douglas is a legendary winemaker out of Australia. And so is Grace. So big shoes to fill. And she's already filling them. So Grace Douglas, she's here today to talk about the paradox of wine. And Grace is in Australia. So for me, it's 5 p.m. and I'm drinking a glass of champagne. But for you, Grace, it's what? 1 a.m.?
Yeah, 1:05. So yeah.
Here for it.
I am here for it. Yeah, I am here for it. I thought, after the vintage hours, because we've just finished vintage, I feel as though my body clock is probably a little bit out of whack. So this feels kind of nice to just be actually sitting here drinking some wine and having a moment. So I feel like it's well deserved.
Yeah, well, cheers. We'll do our virtual cheers. This feels
Our
back
virtual
to
cheers.
like COVID times, cheersing to people on
Yeah.
camera. It's like we really normalize that. So why don't you tell me a little bit about what you've been up to lately? Because I feel like the last time that we talked, a lot has gone on, a lot has changed. I know you're working on a very interesting project, GWB Wines. We should talk about that as well. But what have you been up to lately? Because I know, and it's wild. You just told me about a wine you're drinking that is like blowing my mind. So what have you been up to lately?
Okay, so for the last 3 years, I have been living in the Alpine Valleys, and nobody has heard of the Alpine Valleys. Like, if you talk about the Australian wine landscape, everyone's like, where's that? And even people who work in the wine industry, they're like, sorry, where do you live?
If
And
Dave
I'm
were
like,
here, he'd pull out a wine map, and would he find it?
yeah, probably, but it's quite a new region, in the sense that it used to be tobacco farms, like all through the valley.
Okay.
And so a lot of those families, since they stopped growing tobacco, they either moved over to hops or into vineyards. But the particular winery that I have been working at, quite an interesting story. So, 22 different varieties are planted on the property, and it's all direct to consumer. So nothing goes through distribution. So it's just all through a wine club model, which is pretty cool. Like, it gives me lots of creative freedom. Um,
Hold on. So just to break this down for people who aren't like super into wine, and this might sound a little like a lot of people probably don't know what that means. Okay, 22 different varieties. Is that normal or not? It's not. And you told me earlier it's 40 hectares.
yeah, yeah, roughly. Yeah. So, yeah, the varieties, normally you find that most places in Australia will focus probably on 3 or 4 varieties, depending on their region and what sort of they're known for. But this particular region is known for its alternative varieties. So, people just basically planted all sorts of things that you would have sort of never heard of. And yeah, so we just kind of roll with that. And so for me, over vintage, we took in 200 tons in total, which included some contract processing that I did for some people. And yeah, ran about 70 something different ferments over that sort of. Yeah.
And
So
you're like kind of running the show, right? Like you're a one woman show.
yeah,
Is
so
that
I had a sidekick. Yeah, so he's gone back to Sweden, so he was good help. Yeah, so basically, yeah, everything from the vineyards all handpicked, and yeah, so
70 ferments, 22 varieties? I worked at a winery that had about 40 hectares, and we were producing 200, I'd say probably about 250,000 bottles a year of like mostly high end wines. And we probably had, I think we made 13 different labels out of, I'd say 7 different varieties. So that's wild. It sounds like you could have a lot of fun with that project, but also sounds like 70 ferments during harvest is insane.
yeah, I don't know, it's kind of like when you enjoy your job, it doesn't feel like work. And I know that sounds so cliche, but it's kind of like, yeah, you just kind of, yeah, you enjoy it. So you just kind of roll with it. And you're like, this is fun. So yeah, that's,
Okay. So
yeah.
okay, but so all right. Oh my God. I have questions. I don't know if they're all appropriate for our Wine Wednesday, but like I'm just very impressed, first of all, that, at first when Grace says vintage, she's talking about harvest. I feel like a lot it's an Australian thing to say vintage, right? Or is that just like Southern Hemisphere in general?
Um, I think it's
Harvest.
more so, yeah, Australian. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So,
Because whenever you
yeah.
guys say vintage, I'm like, or crush or whatever, I'm like, harvest. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the one.
Okay, great. Why don't you tell us a little bit about GWB wines, because it's like the next generation of Coonawarra legacy, if you ask me. But I have to say it because I know you're going to be like your dad, and I'll humble that.
Yeah. So GWB, it's really interesting. So when sort of Dad and Jack sort of like started the partnership, I was actually getting some fruit from Jack when I was working at a different winery. And the fruit came in, and sorry, Jack, if you're listening, I happened to have lowballed him on the cost of that fruit, like when we were doing negotiations. And after the fruit came in, I was like, whoa. I was like, this is really, really good fruit. Made some pretty exceptional wine that year. And then sort of Dad hadn't mentioned anything to me about GWB. Like, it just kind of was a little side thing that he was kind of working on. And then, yeah, I don't know, somehow this whole big thing just unfolded, and now we have GWB wines, which is really cool. So, obviously you've got the 2 NFT ones that we've done, and then also the Banana Zone one as well.
We'll get into it in case you
Yeah.
guys don't know. I feel like hopefully you guys know. If you don't know about this, then you need to like show up more because we've released some really, really cool wines with GWB and also with Real Vision in collaboration for the Banana Zone. Okay. So we'll get into that. Carry on.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, when I was kind of prepping for this and I sent you a few notes, I was going back through the vintage that was 2019, which is our first NFT wine with you. And for some reason, winemakers never seem to remember vintages. Like as soon as it's finished, we're a bit like, conditions, weather conditions out of our head. We're like, unless it's really, really good or really, really horrible, you just kind of tend to just, I don't know, you gloss over it. But 2019 was a really good vintage, and even before sort of the inception of GWB, I was actually the person who was barreling down that wine, not even knowing where that wine was going. So I can remember the whole entire process, sort of, because I was the cellar girl at that time, like working sort of for my dad. And he would come out to the cellar and, like, hand us some notes. And I remember distinctly, it was quite cool by the time we started barreling down this wine. The sample tap came out of the tank, which meant that I was there trying to hammer it back in. And, like when you just kind of have a day at work and you're like, oh, I kind of can remember everything start to finish. Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, barreling down that wine, I can remember start to finish. And then watching this whole entire project kind of move forward, I'm like, that's really cool to think that in 2019, we started off there and now we're all the way over here.
God, that's crazy. Because you know what? When you say 2019, I still have this thing where the other day I was looking, this is random, but I'll put it together. The other day I was looking at the ship in the harbor. I was in Bulgaria over the weekend in Varna, and I was looking at the ship in the harbor, and I was thinking like, ooh, like that ship doesn't look great. But it was born in 2000, or it was built in 2005, and then I was like, 2005 was like really recent, and then I was like, oh my god, that's 20 years ago. So when you say 2019, I'm like, that's yesterday, but it's 2025, and it's wild that we've.
I know.
That's the first vintage that we released together is like.
Yeah, the 2019. Yeah, which is insane to think that it was as long as like ago as it was. Like it feels kind of, obviously, things have changed a lot since then.
You've done a lot of ferments.
Yeah, done a lot of ferments since then. Yeah, so 2019, really good year in terms of fruit quality. Quite warm, a little bit of rain, and the yields were a little bit higher than normal. And then 2020, which this is so ironic because that was quite a tough year. So in 2020, most of Australia was under a fair bit of stress with bushfires. Mm-hmm. Yep. So a lot of vineyards actually lost their fruit. Yeah, Coonawarra had a little bit of a frost sort of earlier on in the spring. Yeah. And yeah, with that frost, again, so ironic, again, back to the paradox of wine, if you have a vineyard that is affected by frost, you tend to have sort of high fruit quality because the vines, when they do produce tiny little bunches if they do ripen. Yeah. So yeah, 2020, yeah, good year, lower yields, missed the bushfires, but that is out of the 19 and the 20. The 20 out of the NFT ones is my favorite because I chase fruit purity in my wines. Like you cannot emulate that. You can emulate oak, you can emulate mouthfeel, but fruit purity is just one of those things where it's like you can't manufacture it. Like no matter what you throw at a ferment,
I don't think people understand that unless like people who are really into wine will obviously. Well, I think a lot of people who are really into wine will understand that, but if you're a wine rookie, I think people really don't understand that it's not like people don't understand that vintage matters and terroir matters. Like you hear it, you read it, but people don't understand what that actually means. Like even when you're talking about frost or something, and like, okay, 2020 was not technically as good a vintage as 19, but because of the frost, which is like a negative thing, it ended up being that the wines are more concentrated, probably, right? And like really an interesting vintage. So it's like, it's, but people, this is what I want people to understand about wine. That is real. This is not just something that wine people throw around or like taste the terroir or taste the vintage. Like this is a thing. But
Oh,
this is what we want to talk about today.
yeah,
Paradox.
100%. Yeah, 100%. So, in 2023, where I am now, we had a horrific vintage. Like it rained the whole entire year. Like it didn't stop raining. Like every day it was like, oh, it's raining. And that was probably my first real experience as a winemaker, sort of being handed a whole entire vintage of sort of fruit and someone being like, okay, Grace, I need you to make like the best wines that you possibly can make out of this. And, you know, there are ways that you can do it. You know, we have tips and tricks. It's, you know, it's what we're
Correct.
trained to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
But then, you know, you have a vintage like 24 that rolled along sort of in the next year,
Mm-hmm.
and everything was so easy. It was like, oh, this is great. Like, this is so, you know, it was like nothing was overcropped. Everything really nice, concentrated flavors, really sunny. Yeah. So for me, I suppose when you look at investing in wines, the vintages are super important, like an
Yeah.
understanding, yeah, sort of the nuances behind those vintages. Because even if you make a solid wine from one of those years, it doesn't mean that sort of in 15 years it's going to taste the same as
Yeah.
what a different year will.
So, okay, so we're talking about perception and paradox and how like one glass can tell so many different stories depending on when you drink it and where you drink it and who you drink it with, even. So wine can obviously be pretty elusive, right? And I think if I was somebody watching this right now who didn't know a lot about wine, I'd probably be like, whoa, that sounds confusing. Like, so I don't know, like if the idea of the fact that like the same wine from the same bottle can taste differently depending on, you know, who you're with and when you drink it, how do you approach it? Like how should you approach it as a consumer? What do you
Well,
look
I was like, okay, so I was thinking about this the other day. So during my wine career, I've had to do a lot of wine tasting, like a lot.
for?
And
You.
as yeah, I know, tough life. And a lot of that has been blind wine tastings as well.
Mhm.
So a lot of the time, like we'll have the same wines, sort of, I don't know, sort of within the same 12 months. And I've worked out that every single really good experience that I've had with wine has been when I've kind of dropped the ethos of chasing technical sort of perfection in a wine. And it's either been with people who I really enjoy their company, it's been a good meal, or it's been a bottle that, you know, I've kept aside or been given. And they're probably like the standout ones in my career, you know, because I feel like we're kind of in that day and age where like a lot of people can make good wine now,
Yeah.
you know, but consistency also is like very important, which, you know, a few winemakers, you know, not many can do it very well, truth be known. um, so yeah, that's kind of like for me, I think as long as the consumer, you know, aligns with the ethos of the producer, I think that's also a really important part of what sort of people should be angling for as well when they're buying wines.
So is that to say that if I put a bot like okay, I do this by the way. I put wines aside and like I'll have milestones connected to a bottle. So if you look in my like I've got lots of wines here at home, but then I keep most of my special wines, whether that means like not if I'm buying investment grade wines, obviously, you know, I'm not they're in bonded storage somewhere, like in Bordeaux or London or whatever. But my rare collectible wines that I want to drink, I have in a cellar. It's not at my house, unfortunately, although that would be a dangerous thing because our cellar is just too warm. But I will put a tag on the neck of every bottle, and like on that tag for most of them, it'll say, when I accomplish this thing, or like on this anniversary or this birthday or whatever milestone it is in my life, like that's what this bottle is for. And usually there will be like a story behind that. And I really love that idea. And I get really excited about going back down there and being like, okay, what's coming up? And like pulling bottles. But like, say I drink one of those bottles and I have this, emotion and anticipation set already around it. If I would drink that same bottle again in a blind tasting, maybe, like what you're basically saying is like it might feel totally different and I might not.
100%. 100%.
It's true though.
Yeah, 100%. Like that, it's even yeah, like winemakers, we're the exact same, and we're training our palate to be able to distinguish different wines and that sort of thing. And yeah, even we're the same.
Yeah. I mean, I had to, so but when I have my WSET diploma, so I had to do a lot of blind tastings for exams and things like that. And obviously for seminars and things. And I worked at a winery and I learned wine. I say I learned winemaking. I would never be able to go down into a cellar and be much help to you, I don't think. But I did.
I need it.
Okay. It's not exactly around the corner, but if you need me, happy to come to Australia anytime. But it's just this I feel very confident in analyzing a wine blind. Like I wouldn't have passed my diploma if I couldn't do it. But what I did realize is when I'm, for example, in my kitchen at home cooking and it's a relaxed environment and I'm just hanging out with my husband or I'm with family or whatever, sometimes I have these moments where I'm like, whoa, I just like nailed that wine. And I think it's because I'm relaxed, I'm in a good setting, and like the wine tastes better, like I'm enjoying it more, and I'm really without sitting at in an examination room with 6 glasses in front of me and being like, whoa, like what is this? I think I'm pulling more out of it.
Yeah.
And I'm remembering more. Actually, maybe that's what it is I'm really like they're those sensory aromas and everything, they're really like I'm banking them more, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that there's a lot of I think that when you study wine and you drink a lot of wine, everyone loves to be able to pick something at the dinner table, and everyone loves to be that person that, can say, oh, that's, an Adelaide Hill Chardonnay M3, or, and, you kind of attune your palate to remember these wines. But I think that sort of the older I've gotten, I mean, I'm not that old, but I've sort of realized that, the most enjoyable bottles for me have been the ones where I have just sat back, drunk them, and just enjoyed them for what they are.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of people sort of, they chase the knowledge, but then with that, you do tend to lose a bit of appreciation for things.
Yeah.
And it was quite funny. I was talking to someone about sort of when you go to a cellar door and you're on a bit of a boozy tour, and you get home and you sort of you pull the wines out and you're like, oh, I remembered I really enjoyed this wine. And then you think, oh, wow, was that really what I ordered at the time? Like, was that what I thought that was?
Before you started dancing on the table at the winery.
Exactly.
I'm just kidding. I don't do that.
No judgment.
No.
We listen and we do not judge.
Yes. But so is it the wine that's actually changing? Because I have the same thing when I go on vacation, right? Like if you're sitting on the beach somewhere in south of Spain and you're like enjoying maybe a glass of rosado or something, but and then you bring that wine home and you're like, oh, like coming up a bit flat or whatever. People bring wines home from vacation all the time. And I really get that all the time. People are like, it doesn't taste the same here. Is that because like I took it on a plane, or is that because of this? So what is that?
Well, something like a rosé, like I think this is the saddest thing about rosé. When you make a rosé, so the first rosé I ever made in my career was an absolute dumpster fire of an existence. Like, it was atrocious. And I remember sending out to bottling, and I was like, if this is a representation of my career, I'm going to have to quickly like pivot into something else.
I'm glad you didn't.
Yeah, me too now. Yeah. And sort of, yeah, wine, obviously, it develops like over time. You know, it's never going to be the same wine from when you make it to when you drink it, which is why, you know, it's kind of important to make sure that, you know, you keep track of where your wines are sitting, because there's nothing worse than when you've held on to a bottle of wine and you think, oh, I probably left that for a bit too long, or
Yeah.
yeah.
You know what? This is where our AI is going to get really interesting. So I don't know if you've played with Bacchus lately, but and anyone watching this who doesn't know what Bacchus is already, we have a really cool wine AI tool, and we've been building it for over a year, and it's very, very cool. Tons of proprietary data, and it's by far, like, there's nothing even close. So I can safely say, without even feeling like I'm being cocky or whatever, it's by far the coolest wine AI tool out there, by far. But what it's going to be able to do, and actually what it is already doing, is assessing it can already basically assess a wine list and say, like, this is, so eventually, I always spill alpha when I'm drinking wine. So let me just back up a sec and say that eventually what it's going to be able to do is actually go through your portfolio and say, okay, you've got this, and this wine. They're drinking well right now. You should pull the cork. Or you've got this, and this wine, and you should probably hold on to those or sell those now based on current market data and insights and things like that. Eventually, it'll be able to actually trade wines on your behalf, which is going to be very, very cool. So you'll give it like a risk profile and a budget, and it'll have its own wallet address, and it will actually like trade wines for you. But I think it's interesting to say, like, this is, you have an experience where you're drinking a wine on holidays. Usually those are not investment grade wines, unless, I don't know what kind of holidays you guys are going on, but usually those are like
I'm a winemaker, so none at the moment.
Well, but in terms of investment grade wines in your actual investment portfolio, it's very, very cool. So it'll actually kind of make sure, based on real data and like really good data, it will make sure that you're drinking wines at the right time, or at least notify you to start pulling corks or sell or whatever, or hold and so on. But if you're Grace or I, and we're just, out on the town on a around, I don't want to say out on the town, out in the vineyards on a boozy tour, and just knock it
On the
back.
table.
Maybe it's actually not that helpful. I'll put the wine list into Bacchus and ask, which one, in what order should I drink these 12 glasses? And it will tell me that.
Is my rosé stale?
How bad am I going to feel after I drink these 12 glasses? Just kidding, but not really. Okay. So that was my shameless Bacchus plug. I'm not sure how well that went over.
Well,
Pretty good, right?
I have actually been playing around with Bacchus, and we're best friends, obviously.
I mean, he's a good guy.
He's a really, I mean,
He's a bit of
slightly, yeah, I was going to say he can be a bit sort of
swears
direct. Yeah.
Yes.
Very, very direct. But we need that,
Sometimes you need a little pushback.
Yeah, we need to be kept in line.
I was kind of hoping that I was going for best friend role, but that's fine if Bacchus has a lot to offer. I get it.
Look, I mean, we can all be best friends. That's fine.
So anyone who hasn't played with Bacchus, you should. And this is good. Look, I'm at this point, I'm halfway through my half bottle, and we're halfway through the live stream. So I'm right on time. Okay. So, all right. Well, let's talk about what you're working on with Jack and your dad again a little bit. Like, what's the, where do you guys kind of see the project? Let's say in 5 to 10 years.
So
Goal.
we've set a bit of a rule. 2% of the fruit from the vineyard. We take the best 2% of the vineyard. And yeah, we roll with that. And obviously, Cabernet, Cabernet is king. But I think if you really ask me, and I haven't had this discussion with Jack yet. Sorry, Jack, if you're listening. The
Jack.
Chard, the Chardonnay is exceptional, like absolutely exceptional. And for me, yeah, I would really like to see that as much of a focal point as the Cabernet. Yeah, we just want to keep doing what we're doing, just making good wine, using good oak, and also a lot of the vineyard is sort of transitioning more into that organic sort of sphere as well, which is, to me, really important. Like, it's something that, yeah, I truly believe in, which is good. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think so, and I'll give a little bit of background and kind of in the connection here. So we actually got to know Jack. So a little bit of kind of background. So we now know Grace and Peter. Peter's Grace's dad, both winemakers. Um, Jack Burston, again, shout out to Jack if you're watching. Jack's an old friend of Raoul Paul, and Raoul Paul's on our board. So we've been doing events with Real Vision, alongside Real Vision, with Real Vision for a number of years now, and it's actually a lot of the members of Club dVIN are overlapping with members of Real Vision and Real Vision's RVIP membership. So there is a lot of there's a ton of overlap between the communities. But we've done some pretty cool events where we showcased the GWB wines. And we've actually done a couple of drops already and they've mostly been exclusive to Club dVIN members, but then we also opened it up last year or this year, January of this year. We were in Miami, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
Jana.
for the last
Yeah.
probably about 8 months or so, we've been kind of slowly releasing some of the Banana Zone wines. So this is an incredible. It's a Coonawarra cab. So Cabernet Sauvignon from Coonawarra, which is already, if you're thinking about Cabernet Sauvignon, you're a fan of Cab Sauv, Coonawarra is really a place to look. If you are, a lot of the membership, a lot of Real Vision and a lot of Club dVIN members are in the USA or in Europe. So anyone who's kind of like new to wine and doesn't get a lot of Coonawarra cab or hasn't even tried a Coonawarra cab, like you gotta broaden the horizon a little because it's amazing and it's not hard to get, it's not easy to get at all in Europe. So when I tasted it, I was just like blown away. But what we did is we kind of opened up this allocation token sort of thing where we basically said, if you're a club member of dVIN or if you're within the Real Vision community, you can buy an allocation to the over the line wine. And that means that you actually have the right to buy 6 bottles every year that the wine is produced. But then what we also did was we offered this incredible 6-liter Banana Zone bottle. And this was in celebration of the market coming into the Banana Zone. And I know right now that this is not the time to talk about the Banana Zone, but the wine is incredible. And so we released this wicked, like, imperial bottle. It's 6 liters. It's got Real Vision and dVIN branding with the GWB over the line branding. And it's just this incredible bottle that you need to this is one of those bottles that you have to put like a tag on. You get it, you leave it in storage if it's an investment, because I know a lot of people bought this bottle as an investment, and it will age. How long do you think that will age? Especially in the imperial.
Sort of, I would say Coonawarra Cabernet can age up to 20 to 30 years. Like, as in, sort of, I've been drinking some of my birth year wine, and I was born in 91, and it's still holding up. So it's like 33 years. So yeah, this is wine that it's been made with real precision, like real intent, and it's been made to see, a long time from now, which is a really cool thing to think about.
That's a really cool thing. This is like generational. This is one of those bottles where like so I won't take possession of mine yet, but I also know that mine is not an investment. Like I won't take possession of it yet just because it's safe where it is in pristine condition. It's fine. And I don't like I'm gonna muscle that thing around like it's like the size of me. But if we're talking about an imperial, the larger the format of wine, the fresher it stays for longer, right? Because you have a different oxygen ratio in the bottle. Like if you look at this little bottle next to the no, by the way, I'm so excited to open this. Today was supposed to be a Chardonnay topic, and then we switched it. So I have like a bunch of Chardonnays here, but I'm really excited to open this. We gotta
Ooh.
do. I know that's a Patagonian Chardonnay. That's a 100-point Chardonnay. It's really cool. But I didn't pop it yet. Anyway, but if you look at just the difference in these two size bottles, this is a normal size bottle. You're going to have less oxygen compared to wine the bigger the bottle gets, which means that the wine stays fresher longer. So for an imperial, a 6-liter bottle, that thing's going to age for, geez, like easily 30 years.
Oh, easily. Yeah. And the vintages are good too. So
I tend to ramble, which means that I'm probably not like I am the moderator and I'm the host of our podcast. I'm the moderator of Wine Wednesdays and I tend to ramble. So let me just get back to like, I'm the worst person for this, but let me get back to my story about Jack and Raul's connection and how we got on to like meeting you guys and this whole connection. So Jack and Raul worked together way back, Goldman Sachs. I don't want to say way back. Jack, you guys aren't that old. No. So they worked together for Goldman and had what sounds like a really fun friendship and they've stuck together and they still chat all the time and chat about wine and things like that. And we did a live stream with Raul back when he was in New York a couple of years ago, probably 3 years ago now. And I think Jack watched the live stream and immediately after that, he called us up and was like, hey, you guys need to know about this project. And this was GWB Wines. And again, this is like all about the top 2% of fruit that Jack is growing. So Jack's actually the grower, right? So yes, Goldman Sachs, a very, very bright guy and just one of the nicest people and so helpful. You guys and Jack have just been so supportive of what we've been doing at dVIN and we're so grateful. But just the nicest guy and called us up and was like, you've got to hear about this project. We're using the top 2% of our fruit. And first of all, I was like, as a wine person, I was like, the top 2%. Oh my God. Like there's no project. There's very few projects that can say that. And like sustainably, if not now organically produced fruit and just like the mandate, I think Jack found Peter or he'd known Peter for a number of years, I think, right?
Yeah, so dad was buying fruit from Jack. So it's so funny to think that when I was working with dad, we were already using Jack's fruit. Like I was already using it in the cellar, which is an insane concept to think of because I'm like, it's so strange to think that sort of, I was, late 20s and already was kind of tied to this whole process and just kind of watched it unfold, which has been pretty cool.
Well, so Jack went to Peter and said, look, Peter, I know you'd probably like to retire, but I'd love it if you could just go out and take this fruit and make the absolute, like the mandate is make the absolute best wine that you can make out of this fruit. And like, as a winemaker, how often is it that someone says to you, like, no rules, just like do whatever you have to do to make the absolute best thing out of this. Not like we have this budget and we need this much volume or like these are the materials that you have to work with that are very limited or whatever. It's like make the absolute best wine you can make.
So it never happens. It never ever happens.
Yeah. So this is a wine to try. And so if you're interested in the wine, and this is this isn't really meant to be a sales pitch, guys, but it is just a very cool thing. And there are still a few bottles left. So check out clubdvin.com/OTL over the line OTL. That's the name of the wine. It's a website that it's kind of a little secret website that we initially just released to the Real Vision and Club dVIN member community. So if you want to check that out, there is a Stripe purchase link in there. So you'll be able to get your hands on one of those 6-liter Imperials that is the Real Vision and dVIN. So the Raoul Paul and dVIN kind of specialty bottle. And again, I know we're not it's not the banana zone right now, but like let's be positive.
We're going back. Okay, it's gonna pick up. Okay.
It for 30 years anyways, and if you do, like, well, maybe buy 2. Drink one
Yeah.
now, and
Yeah.
then we can talk about the paradox of wine, like, right? Drink one now.
And yeah, hold on to the next one. That's yeah.
Oh man. All right. So Grace, anything, do we want to, like, is there anything else that you want to mention? Paradox of wine, the emotional tethers, or the variables?
I don't know. Maybe you ask the questions, because I feel like your brain's ticking, and I can tell. So you ask the questions.
Well, okay. Let me hold on. Let me grab my bearings here, because I have. Oh yeah. Hold on. Okay, so we talked about vintage variation a little bit at the beginning. Weather impacts, we talked a little bit about frost. Winemaker decisions, we haven't really talked about a lot. So what kind of things can you basically do to make up for a vintage, like, which one was it 20 you had frost? Which was the rainy year? 24?
23.
3.
Yeah, but that was where I am now. So that wasn't, Coonawarra, I don't know, Coonawarra is amazing in the sense that it just always seems to avoid, and I'm touching wood while I say this, because I don't want to be the person who's like, everything's fine, and then it's not fine. Yeah, there's just,
What's your philosophy when nature challenges your expectations, I guess?
I think for me, it is, you have to think really quickly, because wine, people don't realize that once that fruit starts coming in and you take those bunches off that vine, you have very, very limited time to make the best wine that you possibly can. So you assess it when it is on the vine, and then you assess it when it comes in to the winery. And yeah, there are certain things that you can do, like certain additives into the wine. So natural things, like say, like you can put bentonite, which is like a type of clay. You can put that into the ferment. But sort of something really cool that we were playing with in hotter years has been sunscreen on the vines, like an all natural sunscreen. So yeah, there are just all sorts of things that you can do as a winemaker, but I think that it again depends on the style of wine that you want to make as well.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, the sunscreen thing, I remember learning that way back and being like, what? People don't believe it, right? When I got into wine, I studied and I got my sommelier certification first before I went into the WSET side. So basically, if you don't kind of know what that means, it's like the sommelier side is a little more service based. So it's more like if you're working on the floor of a restaurant and you're kind of on the sales on the floor of a restaurant is really sommelier. So you have to be a lot more familiar with like producers and vintages and things like that, because people are asking you based on a wine list that's in front of them what you recommend. But the WSET side, you learn a lot more. It's kind of a more academic approach. You learn a lot more about what happens in the vineyard, and if you would have raw land, what would you plant there and why, and like what you would kind of need to make that work. And then you learn about the development of a vine and kind of things that you can do to mediate climate challenges, right? So I actually wrote my thesis on climate change and how it affects winemaking. So these were some of the things that I was learning about. And I was like, oh my God, I thought I was a certified wine specialist before, but I had no idea. Like people don't know that grapes, like vitis vinifera, like wines that we use to make grapes that we use to make wine, that they're not planted with like a seed in the vineyard. Cause that's what I thought. And I also thought you just let the vines go and then you harvest them like months later.
Oh, wow.
I did not know. And I was a sommelier. Like they didn't teach us that. I had never stepped foot in a vineyard. I knew all kinds of stuff about how to taste wine, and like sensoric processes and things like that. But I did not know a thing about what happens in the vineyard. Just like, I don't know
I
anything.
do you know it's quite interesting? I honestly feel as though so many people don't understand the importance of a good vineyard and making a good wine.
Mm.
I feel as though you can't, yeah, like I was saying when we first sort of started chatting tonight, like you can't emulate good fruit out of just any vineyard. Like all the conditions need to be right. And that's the one thing that I love about Coonawarra is that the conditions are always really good. Like
Yeah.
there's something about it. And it's very untouched land in the sense that sort of everywhere else you've got a lot of people that are trying to like jam pack vineyards into certain areas. But
Yep.
you know, in Coonawarra it's pretty quiet. Like, you know, it's yeah.
I've got to come out and visit. Yeah. I mean, I know you're not there right now, but when you get back.
Yeah.
No. Okay, well, so talking about Coonawarra, that's like it's a classic wine region. So, you know, we're talking about this classic region, but you're like next gen wave. So how do you see the tradition of Coonawarra or the tradition of wine in general coexisting with innovation, like with dVIN, right? Like, how do you see that?
Oh,
Does it scare you?
no, I'm excited. So I think the wine industry needs a huge shake up in the sense that, and I think it needs people who are actually confident enough to stand up and say, we're not really doing things properly. So I think we need to maybe revisit a few of these sort of old school mentalities. And that goes from everything from growing the fruit right the way through to how the wine is made, sort of everything. It just needs a huge shake up. Like even with the distribution, you know,
Oh yeah.
you look at it and you just think, oh my God, like this is a living nightmare. Like someone's making money and it's it's not the person who's growing the fruit, it's not the person who's making the wine. You know, there are a few people in between that are making money.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just everything about it just needs to be pared back and it just needs to come back to basics. And I think that people's mentality around wine also needs to probably shift because people are stuck in this traditional mindset. Sort of like even when I told you that I was drinking a Nebbiolo Pinot,
Yeah.
you were like, sorry, what?
Yeah.
And it's
I'm still amazed.
yeah, but you know, do you want to try it?
Hell yeah.
Exactly. This is my
Yeah.
point. It's yeah. I think people just need to sort of pare it back, and we need to start re-stepping things out sort of properly because it's just there's something that's really off kilter in terms of when you are a winemaker or a wine producer.
Hmm.
It's really difficult. It's but it's also really fun and really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have a special model, right? So the project that you've been working with now for the last couple of years, because you're a club model, so it's DTC,
Yeah,
which is
it's all DTC.
very
Yeah,
unusual in wine.
yeah, yeah. So everything, at Feathertop is direct to consumer.
Hmm.
But with that, also comes its challenges in the sense that, technology is advancing really rapidly. The market is flooding, and there is not much transparency in the wine industry whatsoever in terms of what people are putting in a bottle, who's making that wine, where that fruit comes from. So for me being a young-ish winemaker, that's their projects that I really have sort of tried to make sure that I've aligned with.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think this whole so there's so many different things that need to be solved in
Yeah.
the industry today that it's like there's so many inefficiencies.
Well, we can start. We'll just,
We
yeah.
can start. No, but it's interesting because like what we actually, so we're putting together a deck right now. And it was kind of interesting. Dave said something the other day that was like, oh my God, like we know that Web 2 would it was never possible to solve all of the inefficiencies that come with like not only tracking a wine's provenance and like verifying that it's authentic from grape to glass, because that's already like you couldn't do that with Web 2. You couldn't do it. But then just like that's one piece of what we're trying to solve. And like Dave said the other day, he was like, if somebody had kind of conceptualized this idea, whatever, 10 years ago or 15 years ago or whatever, like you just couldn't do it. You'd have to invent blockchain before you could have done what we're trying to do. So you just couldn't do it until now. And I think that's just like the industry is so ripe for innovation. And it's funny because people say to us all the time, oh, isn't that like really disruptive? And it's like, no, actually, like it's not. And it's not like people say like, oh, you're revolutionizing the industry. It's like, actually, we're not disrupting, we're not revolutionizing it. It's just like there's a place for everybody here. It just needs to be smarter, and there needs to be a source of truth and
Yeah,
like
transparency.
yeah, and like
It just needs to be transparent. I think
smart
that's
contracts.
yeah.
I mean, there's yeah. Well, we're at 53, and I don't want to now open that whole can of worms, because anyone who knows us knows what we do. Hopefully, if you don't, then you guys need to start listening to our podcast. You need to check out dvinlabs.com. You need to follow us on all of our socials, or you need to just hop on to one of our upcoming. Check out Luma, our dVIN Labs Luma calendar. It's linked all over our socials. We've got lots of really cool educational sort of virtual events that are coming up. We've got all kinds of new content coming out all the time. Medium is the place to look right now if you're really interested in understanding what we are doing to, again, not revolutionize or disrupt the wine industry, but just to make it more trustless and transparent and efficient. Medium.com. We have actually it's news.dvinlabs.com. That's our Medium publication. And Dave's putting out a long form article every week. You can also find us on Substack if you're looking for a shorter version of those reads. And that is news.clubdvin.com. So be sure to check us out everywhere. We are going to wrap it up for today. We're going to be here again next Wednesday at the same time. And I believe next Wednesday, we're going to be talking about Left Bank Bordeaux. So usually we have a theme for these. And if you guys want to come with a glass of wine, we recommend it. I've been drinking champagne today. Grace is drinking a Pinot Nebbiolo, which is awesome. And I do want to try. But next week, we're going to be bringing out the Left Bank Bordeaux. So if you don't have a bottle, go out and get one. But you can show up with anything. And yeah, thank you so much, Grace. This has been awesome.
No worries. Anytime.
And one more plug. If you guys want to check out the 6-liter Imperials of the Coonawarra Cab over the line, incredible wine. It is www.clubdvin.com/OTL. OTL like over the line. So we'll throw that up in the comments on Twitter so that you can find it. And Grace, you got to go to bed, girl.
I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take that glass of wine with you.
Oh yes.
How much damage did you do on the bottle? Let's see.
Not that much. Only probably I'd say a third.
Okay.
Yeah, a third. Yeah, I think I did. Yeah, I did pretty well.
Is there anything about the label that you wanted to show us before we?
I knew that you'd pull me up on this. I knew that you would pull me up on this. So, I mean, look, I'm a real winemaker. I do everything at my job, and that includes sending out a label without proofing it properly. And I may have misspelt the word Pinot.
Looks pretty cool to me.
Look, people thought it was intentional, and I'm going to roll with that.
I like it. Look,
it's cutting edge.
It is cutting edge. I'd love to try me a Pinot.
Pinot.
Sounds the same. I'm trying to mispronounce it, but actually, I think that's actually the future.
Look, we're all about pushing the boundaries here.
Anyone who's a Burgundy fan is just like cringing at me right now. It's the
Yeah.
future. I'm spelling it without the T.
Oh, I know. I cringe too, and I still have nightmares about it.
I love it. I love it, and I want one of those bottles that has that label because I feel like that's the real deal. When you do everything, you are like you're a powerhouse girl. That's I feel like that's a collector's edition.
It will be, I promise.
We need to edit that.
Yeah.
I love it. Amazing. Thank you so so much. And guys, thanks for showing up to another Wine Wednesday, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.